Race number 3 in the chase for the 2009 NASCAR Sprint Cup. The weekend underway here at the Kansas Speedway. Mark Martin took the pole position yesterday, and this the first of 2 practice sessions for those teams under cloudy and cool skies here in Kansas. Steve, Larry, and Jeff back with you after Nationwide Series qualifying. We never go away.
Larry and Curly.
Something like the Pet Boys.
That's it.
Well, you know what? We have Mark Martin on the pole, as we mentioned. 3 chase drivers in the first 3 rows, but you know what, Larry? There's 31 drivers who are not in the chase who could give a flip about Mark Martin or any of the chasers.
Well, it was a very interesting qualifying session yesterday, and actually it was significantly different from that hour-and-a-half practice they had before qualifying, because we saw a lot of the chase guys right at the top of the chart in that practice. But when qualifying was all said and done, we only had 4 in the top 10 and 6 in the top 12. We actually have a lot of the chase guys like Ryan Newman, Kurt Busch. They're going to be starting way back in this field, but the weather's still cold today, but it's not as windy. I think we have a little different day, and the balance it takes to run around here fast for 1 lap in qualifying is totally different from what it takes to run around here for 400 miles tomorrow. The first practice, looking for balance, quick break, and then we want to fine-tune in that second practice.
Well, Jeff, 2 practices. We have 45 minutes of track time right now. You talked about track conditions, both of you, a lot during Nationwide Series qualifying. Obviously an issue here in this practice.
It will be, because of the fact that I think that this racetrack's a little bit on the tricky side. It's real cold here in Kansas. Yeah, the wind quit, but all of a sudden the temperature dropped out. These tires are the same tires we ran a year ago here, and I think that the grip level has gone away on this racetrack, and you've got to be careful through 1 and 2. We've seen a lot of issues earlier today as far as nationwide qualifying. A lot of guys wrecked down in there, and I think some guys are still going to have trouble through 1 and 2. But I look for the groove to kind of widen out a little bit. I think these guys will start searching around. I already see Juan Pablo Montoya working through the middle of the racetrack. I think you'll see a lot of that, and like Larry alluded to, find the balance. What does it take right now to make this car comfortable for a long run? Because you're going to need it. I think the cars are going to give up grip, and you're going to have to worry about making that car feel good as a driver 20 to 30 laps into a run.
Plus said Mark Martin will start from the pole position. The guy right behind him, Juan Pablo Montoya, he'll go off 14th. And Larry, you mentioned Kurt Busch. He starts way back at 39.
Did you see that? I think Mark said, buddy, you're not going to school on me, and you're worrying me to death too early in this practice. Get off my back end.
Well, and I think there's several methods to Mark's madness right here. One, yeah, I'm trying to find out what my race car is doing. I don't need you stuck up the rear of my race car. Also, Mark can kind of sum up that 42 car right here by running behind him. But like you pointed out, Jeff, both ends of the racetrack, that 5 car of Mark Martin hooked to the bottom. The 42 car is up the racetrack. You can move your car around this 1.5 mile track.
And honestly, Larry, I think you're going to find a little bit more grip a little higher up. I think once they get some rubber laid down, I think the racetrack will probably be better with the upper groove more than down low.
I mentioned that Kurt Busch starts way back at 39th. Let's take a quick look at where our chasers start tomorrow here at the Kansas Speedway.
And, you know, Larry talked about it, but I'm going to lay a lot of it on the wind from yesterday. I think a lot of these guys thought they had it figured out, but when they went out to qualify, if a gust of wind caught your car the least little bit, you had to play kind of like pitch and catch. And for a lot of them, I think that's the reason why they're down as far as their qualifying effort yesterday.
But you see both the Roush Fenway cars, Greg Biffle all the way back 31st, Carl Edwards 17th. I mentioned Ryan Newman. Look at Denny Hamlin 22nd, but I think the big surprise, and they struggled throughout the entire day yesterday, was that 2 car of Kurt Busch 39th.
Well, even our pole sitter, we had Mark Martin on trackside. He said, my car wasn't that good. He was 20-something in practice. He said, I told Alan Gustafson, fix it. I went away. When I got in that car, I believed he fixed it. He went out and laid down a very impressive lap. Now he finds himself on the pole for tomorrow's race.
Jimmie Johnson, the defending champion of this race, led 124 laps last September, started from the pole. In fact, he's led laps in his last 4 Kansas starts.
But as you see the scroll across the top of the screen right now, early in this practice, he's run a total of 7 laps. He is the fastest.
Larry, I believe, didn't he say last night, I think we were in commercial on trackside when he joined us, that it got loose in 1 and 2 during qualifying.
Yeah, they had been fighting a little bit of loose, a little bit of tight. There's his crew chief, Chad Knaus. We actually saw him out on pit road during Nationwide Series qualifying. doing his pit selection, but he did say getting off into 1 and 2 has been the Achilles heel for both divisions, it seems like, so far this weekend. He got very loose getting into turn 1. This is a fast mile-and-a-half racetrack, and we've talked about it for 2 days. The least amount of banking that a Sprint Cup Series mile-and-a-half racetrack has. Only 15 degrees of banking, which is not a lot of banking with the speed you enter the corner.
And also the radius of this racetrack is a little bit tighter than others. You know, when you think about the fact we got pretty long straightaways and tight corners.
Jimmy Johnson, the quickest. He's put 9 laps down on this racetrack. Mark Martin in the garage. Stay with us here on Speed. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice from Kansas is brought to you by Toyota. For more Toyota racing information, visit toyotaracing.com. Toyota, moving forward. Mile-and-a-half Kansas Speedway hosting this weekend's racing activities.
What I see, I think we're tomorrow, when they drop this green flag, I think it will be a huge case of comers and goers, because already we talked about Jimmy Johnson being the quickest. His teammate here, Jeff Gordon, is 8th quickest. Denny Hamlin in the 11 car is 2nd quickest. The guy we talked about that struggled a lot yesterday, we'll start 39th, Kurt Busch, right now is 9th quickest in that 2 car.
Brett Keselowski, great qualifying effort in that 25 car. Keselowski in the GoDaddy.com Chevrolet will start from row 2 in the 3rd position. By the way, we just saw Jeff Gordon. We started coming here in 2001. Jeff Gordon won that race, and then again in 2002, the only driver to win more than one race here on the Kansas Speedway.
Hendrick Motorsports yesterday in qualifying set them a mark, because they swept the front row with Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt Jr., the top 3 including Brad Keselowski, and then throwing the fact that Jeff Gordon is 9th and Jimmy Johnson is 11th. All 5 of those Hendrick cars in the top 11.
All 43 cars have been on the track, and all of our chasers are 21st or better right now. Carl Edwards the slowest in the 99 car, just 21st. Jimmy Johnson and Denny Hamlin 1-2 right now on the timing and scoring monitor.
And Steve, watching that, I think that, again, it kind of proves out that the chase guys have gone back, done their homework, and revisited whatever it takes to make the car comfortable, and they're going to get better as we go through this practice. I really look for those guys to move up on the speed chart and kind of be like the first 2 races where we saw chase contenders in the top 10 for the most of the day, and even at the end of the day, they finished up, 8th the first race, 7th the second race, or vice versa. So I think the competitive group is going to be there again tomorrow.
Jeff, I'm always interested in the strategy towards the practices, the game plan, if you will. How will this practice differ from the second practice today?
I think you're going to look at guys coming out here and maybe running 2, maybe 3 different desirable setups and figuring out, okay, let's narrow it down to 1, like Larry was talking about. You want to get the car where it's balanced and you've got a direction to go into, so you can fine-tune the shocks and the sway bars and get it to where it's going to be tunable. Watching the weather, I think the weather's going to change again tomorrow. I think we're expecting more sunshine. Right now, it's just as cloudy and cool. I mean, it's basically cold out there. Like Larry said, he was outside the door just a moment ago before we came on the air. It's gotten colder even since this morning when we showed up at the racetrack. So I think the track temperature, you've got to be concerned with not getting your car set up for this type of condition, but yet you've got to look ahead for tomorrow and make it tunable.
Let's put a number on it. When we started Nationwide Series qualifying at 9 a.m., 49 degrees here in Kansas City.
I don't believe it's much warmer than that right now based on my little trip outside just a moment ago.
Yeah, but you wore 4 jackets last night for NASCAR Performance.
I did, and it felt good.
But it was dark 30.
3 jackets for trackside was not enough.
Went to 4. Bob Dillner.
Well, Steve Burns, Greg Biffle loves this racetrack, but he's struggling here this weekend. A poor qualifying effort yesterday has him mired deep in the field at the start of tomorrow's race. Well, right now, not too happy with this car. In fact, the first run, it was smack dab on the splitter in the corners. So bad, it was just shoving the nose all over the place. So they put some packer to try to keep that car up a little bit, and they changed the rear springs to try to loosen the car up at the same time. So Greg Biffle having some difficulty, like a lot of people up and down pit road. Yesterday, a lack of grip. Well, today, everybody's shoving the nose down here in the garage area.
And Steve, when you look at the Roush Fenway group, I know that they're doing a little bit of experimenting. They're way behind in this chase as far as Greg Biffle and Carl Edwards right now. They need to make a move. And I know they're changing some things coming in here. But the good thing has to be Matt Kenseth, who had a very strong run last weekend at Dover. And like Larry talked about it with his crew chief, about the fact that they knew that they need to have a good run here. Well, right now, they're third on the practice chart. I don't know what he's thinking about his race car, but he's run 8 laps, a great indicator. He's run enough laps to be able to put himself in pretty good position on multiple lap runs, along with his teammate, Jamie McMurray, is 14th in that 26 car. So you've got to believe if they've got questions, they can go over there at least and maybe lean on their teammates and help them help them out.
Larry, I think a lot of people were surprised that the 11 car struggled at Dover. In his post-race notes, Denny Hamlin said, we just never really got fast.
We watched them all 3 of the practice sessions. We watched them in qualifying. We watched them for 400 laps, 400 miles on Sunday. They just never got to where they needed to be. And honestly, I think it was an off day for Joe Gibbs Racing across the board. The 18 car struggled, hit the wall a couple of times. Obviously, we won't know what the 20 car had because of the big wreck he had on lap 31, but across the board, all 3 of the Joe Gibbs cars looked like they were off at Dover last week.
Denny Hamlin to the garage, and we're going to head to a break, but stay with us. A lot of practice here still to come from the Kansas Speedway. Jimmy Johnson, Denny Hamlin, 1-2. Let's take a look at our quality in track description. As Larry said, it has the least amount of banking of our 1.5-mile tracks. Jeff, some banking in both the front stretch and the back stretch.
Yeah, that's the one thing it does make it a little bit easier to get on and off these corners because you got a little bit of banking on the straightaways that kind of catch the car. But again, 15 degrees and you're running around here at over 180 miles an hour. That is not a lot. And again, this racetrack has lost some grip. So again, big challenge for these crews as well as the drivers. But they're managing the best way they know how.
Matt Kenseth finished 5th here a year ago, led 49 laps. In fact, he led 49 laps here in 2007.
But we talked about him a while ago, after the good run that he had at Dover last week, finishing 3rd. Talking to Drew Blickensderfer, this kind of follows up on what Jeff was talking about, that they felt confident, about Dover, because there's Drew right there on top of the holler, that Matt has always run well there. It's been a good racetrack for Roush Fenway. He said the best measuring stick for us where we're at will be these next 2 tracks, Kansas Speedway, and then of course next week at Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California, where they won the race back in February. If we come out of those 2 tracks good, maybe we're moving in the right direction.
Jeff, interesting question posed to Drew Blickensderfer. In fact, it might have been you in that White Ball Wipers Award when you asked if they were writing off this season and trying to experiment for next year, and Drew's answer was no, because if we can pick something up here or the race after that'll help our teammates, it's going to help them win a championship.
And I think that's the big plus right there. He has the ability right now, I think, to kind of coach Carl and help Greg, because he's been there before. He knows how to win a championship, and I think that he is very hungry to turn this year around and end as strong as he started. So I think that'll be a big plus for Roush Fenway, having Matt kind of like experimenting and being willing to test some stuff and relay information.
Wendy.
Well, problems for Tony Stewart here in the garage area. He's run 5 laps in this practice session, but if you take a look, they're under the hood for good reason. The car has lost power. It could possibly be down a cylinder. They've taken all the spark plugs out and checking those out. The engine tuner, and also Scotty Maxim is over here checking underneath the hood. I spoke to Darian Grubb just briefly. He said they're still trying to figure out exactly what the problem is. It could be down a cylinder, but of course they are inspecting that engine, trying to go through everything. So Tony Stewart, if they do have an engine problem, they need to get that engine out of there and get it switched out. But we'll keep you posted on the 14.
And remember, he qualified 5th, so if they indeed have to change that engine, he would have to go to the rear of the field to take the green flag tomorrow.
Better to change it today, though, and lose it tomorrow and wind up losing a ton of points. I mean, he can't afford where he's at right now to give up any more. I think what he's 104 to 105 points behind our leader right now, Mark Martin.
Yeah, 106. He's 5th in the points.
Well, Clint Boyer wants to run well here, a native of Emporia, Kansas. 3 starts here. He finished 2nd in 2007, 12th a year ago.
Qualified 8th yesterday. And right now he is 7th quickest. He's run a total of 9 laps. For the most part, everybody's quickest lap in this practice session was about their first lap out on the racetrack, first or second lap.
And I think it was Jeff yesterday that made the point. You know, Tony Stewart winning in Indianapolis was such a big deal to him. And we don't think maybe of Kansas and Missouri as being hotbeds of racing, but Carl Edwards from Missouri, Clinton Boyer from here in Kansas, and Carl just unequivocally said to win here would be the most important win of my career.
And what's so cool, we talked about that yesterday, is what our series sponsor Sprint has done. They've come up with a state line challenge, and it's basically head-to-head, Clint Boyer against Carl Edwards. Whoever finishes in the highest position in tomorrow's race, Sprint will donate $100,000 in their name to the Victory Junction Cap. Nobody loses on this deal. Whoever finishes second, $25,000 gets donated in their name.
Boyer right now, 7th overall, 12th lap of practice.
You know, Richard Childress Racing has only had, in the 8-year history of this track, 1 top 5 finish by any of their teams, and that was when Clint Boyer finished second to Greg Biffle a couple of years ago.
Bob Dillner, what's going on with Carl Edwards?
Well, Carl Edwards is struggling like so many of the other cars in this garage area with a little tight condition in the center of the corner. So Bob Osborne, and he talked about things when he was in the garage area here, and they're trying a new shock package on this car, but right now Carl Edwards still having a little trouble.
We got Greg Biffle, his teammate, Bob, sliding through the infield grass. He got loose, I believe, off of turn 4.
17 minutes into this practice, it's been a rough morning for Greg Biffle. He crashed in Nationwide Series qualifying on his 2nd lap.
I think the biggest damage that car, besides 4 flat Goodyear tires, looks like possibly a little bit of damage to the splitter and the braces, but the good news is I don't think he hit anything.
Biffle qualified 31st yesterday.
I think this is looking out of Kevin Harvick's car.
Late exit of turn 4 right there.
Very late exit.
Long slide through the grass.
Greg had run a total of 5 laps, 15th quickest in this practice, and this was in Nationwide Series qualifying. He was almost on the pole on lap 1, tried to get a little bit more on lap 2, lost it over in turn 1 and 2, and even though he qualified well up in the top 5, he'll have to start that Nationwide Series race at the back of the field in a backup car.
And you can say what you want to, starting in a morning like this hurts your overall mental frame. Now you spun out again here in the Sprint Cup deal. He doesn't like his race car. And Bob, that's not what this 16 car needs for trying to turn around and get back in this chase.
No, definitely not. You know, Greg Biffle, I talked to him this week, and he was so looking forward to coming to Kansas, where he's won before. He's got 5 top 5 finishes in the last 6 races here. And man, it's just a difficult deal, and you can hear the frustration in his voice as he talks to the crew here. You get Greg Irwin dictating some calls down here. They want to get all the grass out from underneath the car, from the splitter and so forth. They're going to fill it up with fuel. Obviously, they have to put brand new tires on this because he did spin it and might have flat spotted the tire. So they're going to put it up on scales, make sure everything is okay. But Biffle said he just lost. You can see all the grass actually right there by the left rear scale pad right here. That's what was just taken out from around the rear end housing and in the back of the car here. But Biffle's frustrated, guys. It's been a difficult morning, as you said, and he knows at this juncture he needs to get on it or he is not going to have a shot at this championship. And what a better place to do that here at Kansas. That's why he's so disappointed, being that he spun here in practice.
In case you're wondering what the blue was, that would be Nationwide Series blue, where they have the logo on the grass that he spun through coming off turn 4 when he got down in that grass.
We're under caution here at the Kansas Speedway. We'll remind you that tonight, the World of Outlaws Sprint Car Series is back on speed. It's the greatest show on dirt. Don't miss the National Open from Williams Grove tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, only on Speed. I think we need to go back to work. Been sitting here talking to Dale Jarrett about college football. Practice resumes.
Why you want to talk about something that you don't really want to talk about?
Well, you got a good point there.
I mean, you know what's going to happen to Maryland when they roll in there and start messing around with the Tigers from Clemson.
Y'all just
They're
talk
hungry.
about these mediocre teams. My Crimson Tide, they'll be in Kentucky a little bit later on today.
Okay, Mr. War Eagle.
Can you say 5-0 possibly coming this afternoon?
Whatever. He'll be on probation again soon.
I'm just glad they finally decided to pay the money to the coach.
All right, we're back underway.
Did you subsidize his contract?
He is the man. Dale Earnhardt Jr., one of his better qualifying runs in a long, long time outside of the front row, qualified second right beside Mark Martin. Right now he's 13th quickest. He's run a total of 10 laps so far in this practice session.
Yeah, best start of the year. He started third at the Brickyard in Indianapolis. 22nd in points heading in here to this Kansas race, Bob Dillner.
Well, Steve Burns, here's what the 88 team is working on right now. Dale Jr. reported that it was shoving the nose in the middle of the corner. And what he is trying to do is he's trying to drive around that condition. And he's been very detailed in his radio communication with Lance McGrew about what he is doing. He's taking a wider arc to try to make it not tight in the center of the corner. He's telling Lance exactly where his hands are on that wheel, and he believes if they can get it from not sliding the nose in the middle of the corner, he will not have to turn as much, and he will keep up the speed through the center of the corner. But Dale Earnhardt Jr. really calm, cool, and collected in his description to Lance about what they need to do with that race car. Wendy?
Well, Kurt Busch has had some problems, but nothing major for Kurt Busch. It has to deal with the voltmeter. It's been at 14.5. He thinks it's been stuck when he turned the radiator fan off and on. It didn't really move that voltmeter reading. So they are going to change it out in between these two practice sessions. Not a concern too much for Kurt Busch, but what is a concern right now is his very tight race car. Kurt Busch in the top 10 during this practice, currently 9th on the practice chart, has run 12 laps, but they do have some work by switching out that voltmeter in the very short time in between these two practice sessions.
Guys, I was watching a minute ago, the 88 car Dale Earnhardt Jr. If you'll look right at the end of the A, the hood pin is out. Now, somebody didn't do their job right there, Larry.
No, they didn't.
It doesn't hurt anything during a practice session, but that's the kind of stuff that'll get you black flag during a race.
Well, it's just things that should not happen, whether it's practice, no matter what, but it definitely one of those 4 hood pins are out. You know, it's amazing. I was listening to Wendy's report about the 2 car. We used to come to a 1.5 mile racetrack. We never worried about the volts, the alternator, because we really didn't have anything that we were running electrical besides the ignition system, maybe a radiator fan. Even at the 1.5 mile racetracks, besides the things that cool the driver, you do have the radiator fan. You've got a blower on all 4 tires you're blowing air on, where you can tune the handling of the car, and then we use a substantial amount of brake here now with this car, especially when you don't have the banking to hold the car. So there's a lot of demand on that electrical system and the charging system of these cars.
Yeah, they'll be looking at the alternator or the battery one, because a lot of these cars right now run a special type of battery. It's much, much smaller, doesn't handle or store power, and it relies so heavily on the alternator to work properly. As we're watching, hang on to her there, Brian. Brian Vickers in 83, he got a little bit loose right there coming up off the corner.
He's going to start 12th tomorrow. We saw Joey Logano just a moment ago. Logano pretty quick right now. He is 6th overall, and Logano starts 18th tomorrow.
And you know, we talked about a measuring stick of the 17 car, Matt Kenseth, here at this 1.5 mile Kansas Speedway. But to me, these next couple races are going to be a telltale sign for this 83 Red Bull car. They're 10th in the points, 151 points behind Mark Martin. Finished 11th at Loudon, 18th at Dover, but the 1.5 mile, 2 mile racetracks, and we have 4.5 mile racetracks in the chase. That seems to always be the 83 car, but more importantly, Brian Vickers' strong suit.
Still Jimmy Johnson and Denny Hamlin 1-2 in terms of speed. 6 chasers in the top 10. 45-minute practice rolls on here at the Kansas Speedway. Stay with us. Juan Pablo Montoya, seems like every week he exceeds everybody's expectations except perhaps his.
I don't think he's, yeah, you're exactly right. He is definitely, I think, on a mission, and he is not exceeding what he believes he can do, but everybody else has been surprised. We talked about it. if you look at the records in the past, he's not supposed to be doing what he's doing. But he and Brian Patty right now basically have said, forget what we've done. Just focus on today and the future. They're doing a great job. And right now, Larry, I'm looking at him. He's 17th quickest on the speed chart. But to me, what's more importantly, 5-lap average, he's 3rd quick. 10-lap average, he's 2nd quick, right in behind that 48 car. And I think that's what you've got to look for. And I talked about it earlier. 10, 20-lap runs. If the car is balanced, that's where you're going to be successful. And Wendy, you know, is he happy with the car?
Yes, he is, and that's exactly what the 42 team is doing. They went out and ran that 15-lap run. It was a little bit longer than any other car on this end of the garage area. They stayed out the longest for a long, consistent run of those 15 laps. And like you said, Jeff, he's good on those long runs and the overall average of him. Now, the thing he's most uncomfortable with is his headrest. He said, something is different about my headrest. This is not my normal headrest. It's different than it has been in the last couple weeks. So they are going to look at that. Driver comfort plays a big key in getting that driver comfortable and keep the speed out there on the racetrack. If the driver's not comfortable, we know how much trouble that can cause. They are going to work on that headrest in between these 2 practice sessions as well.
Well, I think this was a product. The good news is they keep bringing him a brand new race car to the racetrack every week. This is the 3rd consecutive week they've brought a brand new car from Montoya. But you go through those kind of, we call them new car blues with the seat and the headrest. And I think that supports what Jeff was talking about. The best 5-lap average. Jimmy Johnson, who's also the fastest in this practice, but you see Montoya right there. He is 3rd quickest as far as the 5-lap average.
And those are all top 4 guys are all chase contenders right there with Jimmy Johnson and Ryan Newman, Tony Stewart included in that group.
You know, Jeff, I've always been fascinated. There can be literally nothing scientific about a favorite car. Buddy Baker said it's like your favorite pair of shoes. DW has said it's like that favorite sports jacket you put on. It just feels good. Nothing all that technical about it.
No, it really isn't, but I think the main thing today with race cars is that we've been able to repeat the cockpit area so much more effectively that drivers, once they get comfortable, I think they're focusing on where their seats and their pedals are, and teams do a much more efficient job of being able to repeat that than ever before. So getting them into new cars and making them comfortable and making them believe that a new car is better is easier than what it used to be with us. And I think the other part of that, Larry, is today the teams, when they build a car, between the roll bar tubing and all the specs that they go through, that cars are a lot more consistent than they ever were back in our time. When you got a good car, you wanted to stick with it because it gave you repeatability. These teams today, they have repeatability from car to car to car, much better than we used to have.
Yeah, the biggest thing you have to work out now is the travel on the front. How much shim stack does it take right before that car bottoms out? This was probably the biggest surprise of Friday. Casey Kane in that 9 car. When we look at the practice sheet, they were 45th quickest out of the 46 cars that were here attempting to qualify. But when he went out and qualified, he laid down a lap that was good enough for 8th quickest for that 9 car. And they are still back to the old engine package after breaking that crankshaft at Loudon a couple of weeks ago.
You'll let me know when the Shim Stack episode of NASCAR Performance is?
I will let you know, I promise.
I record all of them.
Twice.
Twice, both airings.
So that means you'll watch it 4 times because it airs twice.
Correct.
This weekend.
Correct. Well, I can't always see it when it airs, but I do record both.
As long as you're watching, that's all that matters.
Bob Dillner.
Here's what's really interesting in listening to some of the radio conversation here in the garage area. A lot of people talking about the front splitters on the cars, and we talk about the front splitter hitting the racetrack, and a lot of times guys take a paint can and paint the bottom side of that splitter to see if it's rubbing. Well, the Red Bull crew do something just a little bit different. Take a look at these little white pieces of plastic. Basically, they unscrew that nut right there and then drive this little stick down, and it actually pokes underneath the splitter, and that way they're able to tell when he comes in how much it is rubbing up against that splitter by this indicator right here. And right now they have finally gotten the splitter off the ground for Brian Vickers. That was a big problem early on for him. He's much better now, 18th quick, still a little tight in the center, and they're trying to work on that. He says he just can't carry the speed through the center of the corner. Another interesting thing you see down here, take a look at that rim. Who says they don't use any brake whatsoever here? at Kansas. You can see how dirty that right front rim is, guys.
You're right about that, Bob. I think like Larry pointed out, we're having to use more brakes here because you're carrying a lot of speed, trying to get it to turn. But the cool thing about it is this is the first practice, and they got a little bit more time to work on it before the final.
Speed's coverage of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice from Kansas is brought to you by Camping World's destination recreation sweepstakes. Log on to campingworld.com/racing to enter weekly giveaways. This week, win one of five $500 shopping sprees. David Rudiman in the 00 right now, 4th fastest. Still Jimmy Johnson, Denny Hamlin, then Matt Kenseth, and David Rudiman.
David Rudiman qualified 13th yesterday. You know, one thing that probably is promoting these splitters bottoming out today, and maybe they were not yesterday, is even though the speeds are down, one thing you do to race here is you really drop the air pressure in the tires. You will drop the pressure down to almost 20 pounds in the left side, in the mid to low 40s in the right side. The only air pressure you have to maintain per the NASCAR rules of air pressure here is you can't go lower than 47 PSI in the right front, because they feel like if you go below that, it steps across the durability. There would have been a lot more air in the tires yesterday for qualifying because you're trying to get good grip for 1 or 2 laps.
And the other part of that, Larry, I think a lot of teams have had to go back and redefine where that level was. It's because of the wind. I mean, a lot of guys were focusing on qualifying and kind of gave up on making long runs. Now that it's kind of, gotten where the wind's died down, they're getting a better idea where the balance of the car is, having to work through all that process because they want to get it down as low as they possibly can without hitting the racetrack, Steve. That makes the most amount of downforce as well as the least amount of drag. Let's don't forget, this guy won on a 1.5-mile racetrack back in May at Lowe's Motor Speedway. A lot of people say, well, he didn't really earn it, but he was in position to take advantage of it. And this 00 team has run extremely well this year.
You know, you put yourself in position to win, you're going to win.
You're going to win.
Our buddy Elliott Sadler in the 19 car, he's going to have his work cut out for him tomorrow because he's going to start 42nd in this 19 car.
You think he still has that fly hat on? He had a trackside.
And the pink sunglasses?
The pink sunglasses?
I think he had to give them back to the fans.
Oh, those weren't really his.
No, they weren't really his. And I mean, I wasn't too sure about the hat. I liked the sunglasses because, again, he was doing it thinking about the Suman G. Coleman deal and pink and everything, but
you couldn't see his jeans. He had 9 safety pins.
Yeah, I saw him. I'm not real happy with that. I mean, because you got to realize, I'm going with this guy. I'm going hunting with this guy first of the week.
There's his look from trackside.
I wouldn't even go near the woods with a
Well,
it looks like he's been hunting. It's on his head.
If he shows up out in the woods, something like that, they're going to think he's Sasquatch and shoot him.
He'd been hunting, so he was wearing it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you what, all kidding aside, our old buddy, he's doing a neat thing here this weekend. He got hooked up with 3 Army servicemen through talking to him on the internet. And they are here this weekend with Elliott and his group for a special VIP weekend, because here very shortly, those 3 Army servicemen, they're going to be redeployed back to the Middle East. So he's showing them a good time here at Kansas this weekend.
You know, Larry, and it bears repeating, we mentioned yesterday, these guys that are going back, and that's the key, going back, they've had 4 and 5 tours of duty over in the Middle East.
Well, if you ask most of them, they'll tell you real quick, they want to go and support one another. It's like you, our group here.
Absolutely.
We're a team, and they want to go and support one another, and they do a great job over there defending our country and protecting one another. And you got to respect them for what they do and the passion that they put into defending our country.
On board with Jimmy Johnson, just past the start-finish line. 18 laps of practice for Jimmy in the 48.
He's fastest in the practice. He's fastest in a 5-lap average. He's fastest in a 10-lap average. He's just fast.
How about Mark Martin saying he wants it more than I do?
He said he's the man.
He is the man.
Welcome back to Sprint Cup Series practice here this Saturday afternoon at Kansas Speedway. The thrashing continues in the 14 garage area. You can see that the window net's back up on Tony Stewart's car. The engine guys have done all the checks they can in this short practice session. They are getting ready to send Tony Stewart back out there on the racetrack. Tony had heard an audible change in the engine while he was out there, and he thought it picked up a slight vibration. Scott Maxim with Hendrick Motorsports on the engine side of it has been under that hood the majority of this practice as Tony is just now pulling out. He has lost a lot of time during this practice session. They are going to go in between these two practice sessions, go back under that hood, look at the engine and do some more checks, but right now they've lost some valuable time. They're trying to get a good feel for this chassis and then double check that engine in between the practice sessions. Steve?
And there's actually a lot of things they can do, Wendy. I'm sure what they may possibly do in this break is pull the valve covers off if they didn't do that right then, and just look at everything good there. And they can actually pull the spark plugs out, and they have a tool called a borescope that actually is a tube with a light on it that goes down in each cylinder, and they can look at the piston and the cylinder walls of each cylinder. They can determine a lot of things with just some short tech check-in devices and going through some short process.
Yeah, like looking at the filters. I mean, they have the ability to take those apart and make sure they don't see anything inside those filters that may indicate there's a problem developing within the engine. But I want to point out the reason why they're taking so much time. If the problem is not obvious, they've got to be careful, because, I mean, if they don't like what they're hearing here, even though they may want to change this engine, Larry, you know, if you do and you don't find something wrong with it, that engine belongs to NASCAR. And I mean, that's a really expensive piece. As you take a look right there at Darian Grubb and everybody, they're watching.
Scotty Maxim there on the left.
Everybody is very much focused on this 14, and undoubtedly something's not right, because he's coming back to pit road. He didn't barely get up to speed.
Yeah, there's something he doesn't like. He's not feeling something right. And I think Tony Stewart, of course, he's 5th quickest in this practice session as well. He knows if something's not right, that you got to put confidence in that.
Well, and Jeff mentioned this earlier. Tony comes in here 5th in points, 106 points behind our leader, Mark Martin. There's no margin for error.
Well, and I know Mark Martin said it last week after the Dover race. We're only 20% through this chase. But when you look at our top 4 guys, when you look at Mark Martin, Jimmy Johnson, Montoya, and Kurt Busch, those 4 teams, they've laid down 2 top 6 finishes each team has in these first 2 races. And all have been top 5s, with the exception of Kurt Busch finishing 6th at Loudon. I don't think you have a mulligan as to the fact of like an engine failure in a race that'll get you back in the championship hunt.
Larry on board with Kevin Harvick. He is 20th overall. He's put 28 laps on this racetrack in this first of 2 practices for the Sprint Cup Series teams here at the Kansas Speedway. Tomorrow, NASCAR race day thunders into Kansas for the 3rd race in the championship chase. We'll chat live with Jimmy Johnson as he sets his sights on teammate Mark Martin. And Joey Logano talks about his thrill ride in Dover. NASCAR race day built by the Home Depot, live from Kansas, starting at 11 Eastern tomorrow here on Speed. Closing minutes of this first practice for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series teams. You see Casey Mears in the 07 car. He is 11th overall.
Yeah, he didn't get a very good qualifying run in yesterday, Steve. He's going to start 36, but he's been pretty solid. He's run a total of 26 laps, and he had a great run going last week at Dover. But of those 8 cars that stayed out on that last caution about lap 368, the only 2 cars that got bit by it were the Childers cars. Casey Mears and Clint Boyer, they got passed by a lot of the cars with fresh tires.
Steve, I've just been watching. We're looking at the back of Kevin Harvick's car to the number 2 car of Kurt Busch, and they had a pretty good battle going for about last 3 laps. Kurt was leading Kevin, and Kevin ran him down and went by him. Now Kevin's coming to pit road, and so is Kurt. But it looked to me like both those cars right there, one was running a higher group and one was running the lower group. So it'll be interesting to see what they do to their cars, and it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out, because the last time I remember seeing Greg Biffle, he was going sideways down through the front stretch grass area.
Sideways, backwards, every which way. Coming off turn 4, he got into the grass.
But he has about 10 laps, 10 or 11 laps in on this car since he made that spin, because now he's run a total of 16 laps, and he's 15th quickest.
But I just wonder if he's any happier.
Just looking, he just ran a 32.36, probably with a little fresher tires than some of the other guys. Looks like to me that very possibly Jeff Gordon in that 24 car, they probably just put some fresh tires on. But honestly, running in the mid-32s right now is not bad lap times.
Still Jimmy Johnson, Denny Hamlin, Matt Kenseth, and David Rudiman Saw Tony Stewart, he's 5th overall, but he just went back to the garage without really getting up to speed. They're concerned about perhaps the motor, the drivetrain issue. Wendy Venturini's been following that during this practice.
As far as the most laps in this practice, looks like David Rudeman, they've run the most at 32 laps. Mark Martin has run 32, and Kevin Harvick, we just saw him in that 29 car, he's run 31 laps.
And the 39 car just finished up running his 35th lap right there in behind Jeff Gordon.
Just 2 minutes left in this practice.
And I want to go back to the 14 right quick, and hopefully Wendy will be able to give us an update. But you think about it like this: if they're going to change that engine in the 14, they need to get it done. If that's what their long-term plan is, they're going to get it out. They've got a short period of time between the final practice, and they got about an hour and a half left in the rest of the day, as far as they got an hour and a half practice to go. So they have enough time to get it in and changed out, but they're going to have to get going on here if they want to be able to get it accomplished. I see the car coming back out of the garage area, so maybe they've got something figured out.
Well, they want to get one more run in, because we're about to see the red and black flag very shortly on this practice session.
And they are, in fact, thrashing. And Jeff, it gets back to what I asked you about, you know, the agenda you have in practice. And Wendy mentioned it too. He's lost a lot of time on the racetrack. Wendy?
Well, and I also wanted to add, now he came back in there, you guys saw him when he went back out the last time. He came over the radio and said there is something wrong. It does not sound right. It has a vibration. It sounds like it's down a cylinder. They came back in, they went back under the hood. They ran some more tests of what they could in this short amount of time. Now, you know there's only 2 minutes left to practice before the red and black flag will come out, and they did want to get a few more laps out there before this practice session ended. But I'll tell you guys, and this is, you've seen this happen in the garage area. This has raised a lot of eyebrows around this garage area. Of course, all the other chase teams are watching the 14 guys work on Tony Stewart's car. Everybody's looking to me, say, what's wrong with Tony Stewart? They want to know what's happening with the chase contender. Tony Stewart has sat in that race car much of the practice session in this garage, and finally getting back out for this last minute of practice.
Thank you, Wendy. And Jeff, as I was about to say, as practice does conclude, is whatever their agenda was, they were not able to achieve it because they sat in the garage for much of the practice.
No, and this is where having a teammate like Ryan Newman may be invaluable, as far as them being able to work on their car and maybe getting it where he needs to have it for that final practice. If they have to change an engine, well, they're going to lose some more time too.
Stay with us here on Speed. We'll come back and wrap things up. Still cool, still windy here at the Kansas Speedway, seeing a little more sunlight. And this first practice of 2 has concluded for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series teams. And it's time now for our Sprint Now moment. It's been a rough morning and a rough early afternoon for Greg Biffle. He crashed on his second lap of qualifying in the Nationwide Series session, and then off turn 4 in the Cup practice, guys.
The good news is the Cup car's in much better shape than that Nationwide Series. And Bob, they actually got back out on the racetrack for a little bit more practice.
They did get back out in the racetrack, and I just spoke to Greg Biffle, and he was still able to crack a smile despite everything that has gone on here today. You see the 16 car in the background. He said the car was just too loose. They kept on putting more right rear spring to it, and that just kept on freeing it up a lot more. So they finally got it reasonable at the end of this practice session. Greg says they still have to dial it in a little bit better in the final practice session, but they're a lot closer than they were at the start. Now, right next door is Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon is still a little bit tight, but the one thing that Jeff Gordon keeps on telling his crew is, I cannot believe how fast this track feels this time at Kansas. It feels a lot faster than it did any other year here. So I don't know why that is, but Jeff Gordon battling a little tight condition, but he cannot believe the speed here, guys.
You know, the one thing I see, though, when I top 10 in this practice is a lot of those 31 guys that are non-chase teams trying to bust the bubble here at Kansas, especially the man that wants to win at his home track, Clint Boyer, who was 7th quickest.
The main thing is, Steve, can Jimmy Johnson and Mark Martin keep up the pace that they've put out so far in the first 2 races? Or can Stewart, Newman, or even Gordon turn them around?
Thanks for watching here on Speed. Stay with us all weekend for more coverage.